This is KGNU Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. Stay tuned for Metro.
The KGNU Board of Directors reminds listeners that all our board meetings are open to the public. The KGNU Board of Directors meets at 6 p.m. on the second Monday of every month. We also have a Community Advisory Board that meets twice a year. All meeting dates, times, and locations are posted in advance on our website, kgnu.org. You can also get more information on KGNU board meetings by calling 303-449-4885 during business hours, or by sending an email to board@kgnu.org.
Support comes from the League of Women Voters of Boulder County, presenting its online Voters Guide, a list and profile of candidates for this upcoming election. More information at vote411.org.
Good afternoon and welcome to Metro on KGNU Radio, Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. I am your host, Miriam Schiff. Today's program is the first in a two-part series of discussions with author, teacher, speaker Kelvin Chin. In today's program, we will discuss his book, Marcus Aurelius Updated, 21st Century Meditations on Living Life. Kelvin looks at the importance of looking at meditations, a series of personal writings by Marcus Aurelius, Roman Emperor from AD 161 to 180, recording his private notes on himself and ideas on Stoic philosophy. The question is there a connection from the template of meditative writing by a Roman Empire living 2,000 years ago? How do we live our lives? How does it coexist with what he was looking at 2,000 years ago? Next Monday on November the 15th, we will discuss Kelvin's thoughts on his book, Overcoming the Fear of Death, through each of the four main belief systems. How do we look at death and how is it impacted from a specific point of view that we hold? Kevin is the director and founder of Turning Within, Meditation and Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundations. He is an internationally recognized meditation teacher featured in Business Week, Insider, Newsweek, Kaiser Health News, and much more. For further information, please go to his website, Kelvin Chin, that's KELVIN Chin.org. You can also go to Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation at turningwithin.org, as well as his YouTube channel. Welcome, Kelvin. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here, Miriam. Thank you.
What was the catalyst for you to write Marcus Aurelius Updated, 21st Century Meditations on Living Life?
First of all, the book is a collection of 67 essays that I've written. It's also, it begins with a commentary, a personal commentary by myself about some of Marcus Aurelius's maxims that he wrote, as you said, almost 2,000 years ago in the 2nd century. And what I wanted to show was a parallel, as you said in your introduction, between thoughts that this 2nd century Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius was having, and today, my thinking today about how we live our life now in the 21st century, whatever the math is, 1800 years later. The thing is, there's a lot of parallels, and a lot of our human nature, our personality traits, we'll call them, across the human race, have not changed. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that how we express them may have changed in certain ways, but how we've expressed those personality traits that we have as a human race, in large part, have not changed. And is there a way to look at some of these, what I'll call personality traits in the human race, through the same kind of passionate, rigorous lens that Marcus Aurelius did today? Can I look at them today through the Kelvin Chin lens, and help the human condition improve? Because that's when he did it, he was doing it more from a personal standpoint. He wasn't doing it to help other people. It was very personal for him. That we can talk about that. But what I'm doing was personal and for my students, and that's why I collected these essays.
1900, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
going back, what drew you? What drew you to Marcus Aurelius, an emperor 1900, 2000 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I've had a connection with him for a long, long, long time, let's just say. And his thinking and what I've liked and resonated about with his thinking for many, many, many years is his practical view of living life, with not looking at things from a holier than thou standpoint, because he talks about in some of his writings, which somebody later called them meditations. He didn't call them that. He was just writing stuff every day as a self-reflection. But somebody collected them they found them in around 800 AD. This is the history behind his original writings. They found them in around 800 AD. And about 300 years ago, somebody said, hey, let's put them together and call them Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. But what resonated with me is he looks at life, he looks at himself, he sees himself as flawed at times, and how can he improve himself? And I think that's an underlying message, I think, for all of us, because none of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody is. How can we look at ourselves? And, in my work, I call it turning within. How can we turn within, look at ourselves, and then critically look at ourselves, but in a loving, critical fashion, and improve ourselves? And that's what he was doing. And that's what I've done in my new book through these different lenses, as we'll talk about.
And in reading it, there were so many of his writings that I was feeling, things that I was believing, things that I might have to look at about myself. Correlations were amazing. As far as your background goes in business and spirituality, how did it impact your writing of this collection of 67 essays?
Well, I've been in business and spirituality, you could say, my whole life, my whole adult life anyway. I had a business career. I had a corporate career. I went to law school. I was several large law firms, starting out in Boston when I got out of law school, after graduate school. So I went to Dartmouth undergrad, Yale graduate school, and then Boston College Law School. So I had a law and a corporate career. But all the while, I had, you could say, my spiritual interests and pursuits were going along at the same time on a parallel track, all of those 50 some odd years, because I learned to meditate when I was 19. I was 19 years old. I was very stressed out. I needed something to help me. I was desperate. I needed something to help me through my anxiety at the time. And then I learned to teach it. So I've been teaching meditation, as you mentioned in the introduction, for 48 years now. I taught the first meditation courses in the history of West Point Military Academy. I taught in the U.S. Army. So I've been the DMZ in Korea, teaching on all the Army bases in Korea, Air Force, U.S. Air Force bases, and so forth. And in this book, really, I think, kind of captures both, simply because both being steeped in business and doing reorganizations of $20 million business operation, along with meditating and being interested in how to improve myself and help others improve on the spiritual side, has informed all of the 67 essays for sure, in the way that I've written them in this book, because I talk about forgiveness, I talk about self-interest in the book, I talk about love and what's this idea of unconditional love and consciously being a loving person. I talk about free will, destiny, and there's a chapter on meditation. So there's a chapter on emotions, meditation, life principles, how to live life better through various lenses that we look through. And then there's a spiritual chapter, as well as the introductory chapter I mentioned, where I talk specifically about Marcus Aurelius's, some of his specific maxims. So the book really covers a very wide range of things that I've thought about really over the 50 years I've been involved in spirituality and business.
In today's world, we have a verbal and sometimes physical onslaught of others, and it may be difficult to perceive this meditation is feasible, and I want to quote him now. It is our free will and creativity that we each can access and use to be successful in our own lives. There are many that would disagree with that because they don't feel that there is free will. They feel that there is a certain amount of manipulation. So how do we go from what we see around us, which is the perceptions of others and our perceptions of the world, to get to our free will and creativity that we can all access?
First of all, let's define free will. So free will simply means personal choice. It's very simple. It's not a complicated concept. It just means personal choice. So do we have personal choice? And you're using an example in our culture, in our world society. It's not just here in America, but worldwide, are people pushed and cajoled, and you could arguably say forced from a societal or a cultural or religious or political standpoint, whichever lens you want to look at, into certain kind of boxes that they have to perform in and behave in accordance with. And the short answer is, yes, that does exist. But the issue of free will means that do they have a choice to rebel? Do they have a choice to do something different? We would, in that context, we might call it rebelling. But, in the free will language, we would call it, do they have a choice to do something different? And the answer is yes, they do have a choice. Is it a difficult choice? Is it sometimes an almost impossible choice? In certain contexts, the short answer is yes. But do they have a choice? That's what free will means. Does the choice exist? That's what free will means. And so you're right. The rubber meets the road always in living life, in those difficult situations, not in the easy situations. I always tell people, look, when you have lots of money and you're fully employed and you're really healthy and everything's going really hunky-dory in your life, that's not the metric to measure who your friends are. The metric to measure who your friends are is when you're unemployed, when you're really down and out, and you're not feeling well. Who's there to support you at that time? Those are your friends. The fair weatherness issue. And it's the same in religion. It's the same in politics, the same in whatever you pick. You want to pick a filter to look through. And so, yes, we do have free will all the time. And yes, it also is sometimes difficult for people to exercise fully in certain contexts, but they always have the ability. That's what's never taken away. And so, I use sometimes the James Bond issue because it kind of lightens it up a little bit. But people understand, you've seen a James Bond movie, there's always a James Bond scene. It's part of the formula of the movie story where he's in an impossible situation and the bad guy's got him chained down. And he somehow gets out of it every time. And he uses his free will with his own guile, his own, it's obviously written into the character script, but he uses his guile, the James Bond character, to trick his captor. And so does he have the free will to do it? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes. And they write the script so that it's nearly impossible. But it's like life is like that.
I need to coin the phrase that you just said. He uses his free will to understand what's going on and getting out of the situation. In today's time, and I think historically, free will has to be taught. Somebody has to tell a child who is not a privileged child, this is what free will is. And this is what your creativity is, and teach them about how it fits in to their persona. This is not an innate understanding. This is not an innate knowledge. This is something that needs to be taught.
It needs to be taught, and there's a flip side to that. And I'll give you a personal example of how, a little self-disclosure about myself. You're absolutely right. We need to encourage people to exercise their free will. First of all, that starts with understanding that they have free will to make their choices and so forth, and that they can, and even when they're in this constrained, constricted sometimes situation through whatever filter we were just talking about, they can still exercise their free will, and we need to encourage that. And at the same time, we need to encourage and teach people that everybody has free will. And this is what people forget. Once they learn that they have free will, they think they can foist and push their free will on everybody, all their choices on everybody else. And the issue is we need to respect the fact that everybody has free will. That means other people have the free will to not agree with us. And for me, from a personal standpoint, this was some decades ago, but it took me a while to learn myself that by my pushing my choices, we'll call them, on other people on how they should self-improve, I was, in a sense, stepping on their free will toes, so to speak. And I have embraced now more fully, and it's always a work in progress because nobody's perfect, but I'm embracing more fully now in my more recent decades of my life, the fact that everybody has free will. And I need to respect and be humble and inclusive about other people's choices, especially when I don't agree with them.
That's a big lesson, and it has to, and there's an evolving and an evolution of that in humankind. I think that's the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome, that you don't have to, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing throughout the world now that my free will supersedes yours.
Yes.
And therefore I'm going to force my beliefs and the free will I have to live my life a certain way and who I am onto you, or I'm just going to null and void out who you are.
Right. Exactly. That's where the rubber really meets the road right now. We see it in bold neon flashing lights throughout the world right now. And it was, and I consider myself somebody who has been looking at himself for many, many years from a personal development, self-improvement standpoint. And it was an epiphany for me that finally, it's not an intellectual thing. It was an epiphanous experiential shift for me several decades ago when I made that shift, and it's freed me up. That's the thing. It has freed me up, and it has made me a better person for it. And I can have conversations with people who I really don't agree with on some very powerful, what I consider key, fundamental, important issues. But it's where is the overlap when so I have a history from a business side of having done over 500 mediations. So I teach meditation, but I also used to teach mediation. I did conflict resolution, and I helped people in conflict resolve their disputes. And so what I quickly learned is we need to look for what I call the overlap of the Venn diagram. Where the two circles overlap, that's where we have the commonality. That's where we can possibly have friendship. That's at least possible where we can have conversation, if not friendship. And that's what's missing. Everybody's walking around like all the circles are walking around, and nobody's looking to see where and when the circle overlaps. That's what people need to do more of.
We teach that when we're re-educating the powers that be on the commonality between both of you. And it's not a cognitive commonality. It's something that you want in your life, in your family, in the people around you, and the people that you love in your communities. There's not much difference. This is KGNU Community Radio with your host, Miriam Schiff. This program is the first in a two-part series discussion with author, teacher, and speaker Kelvin Chin. We are discussing his book, Marcus Aurelius Updated, 21st Century Meditations on Living Life. Kelvin can be reached on his website, Kelvin, Kelvin, Chin.org, and also on Turning Within, which is his Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation. You're doing there's a part in your book on, well, let me go back. There's another one that, another quote that I believe fits in on cruelty and the importance of being important.
Yes.
Which is, see that you never feel toward the inhumane what they feel toward mankind.
Yes.
And I believe that we're in this quagmire now.
Yes.
Which also goes along with what we were talking about, the sameness. How do we, it seems like impossible to do. How do we do that?
Yeah. So first of all, let's define what we mean by cruelty here. The idea of cruelty, I think most people would agree, is when somebody takes pleasure in bringing unhappiness to some other person or persons. That's the idea of cruelty. That's a cruel person. They get pleasure out of making other people unhappy or making other people suffer. And so why do people do that? I think if we think just step back and we think, and first of all, let's just be very candid. We've all done it. You know, we all like to point fingers as that person over there who's the cruel person. But we've all been in that mode at some point. Maybe we haven't been really what we may consider cruel, but there are degrees to this. It's not black and white. It's not on and off. And, you know, there have been moments, for example, when I was driving when my kids were little, they're older now, but when they were little, we're driving in the car and everybody's blood sugar is a little low and we need to get to a rest area to get some food or something and on the highway. And, you know, I snap at them. So that's a little bit of a cruel behavior, you could say, because okay, my blood sugar is low. We could give that as an excuse, but the bad behavior was the bad behavior. Maybe I wasn't as patient as I could have been. Okay, well, I know you could say, was Kelvin really getting pleasure from hurting his children by doing that? Well, it made me feel a little bit better because it's like a little bit of a release. You know, it's a pressure release. So yeah, but so not cruel like some people, but still not healthy, loving behavior like you're alluding to. So we've all done it. And the thing is, what can we do to improve that situation is to turn within, strengthen ourselves, because, you know, in that case, it would be easy fix, stop and get some food and get my blood sugar back up. But for other people, it might take longer than just getting some food in them. It's more kind of ingrained in how their personality is and in their level of low sense of self-esteem, let's just say. When they're not feeling really good, when a cruel person is not feeling good, what do? The best thing for them, the fastest way for them to feel better is to depress everybody around them. So what do? They step on everybody around them. They make other people around them feel worse so that they feel better. That's the simple formula, I think, that creates cruel behavior. And as I said, we've all stepped in that quagmire at times in our lives. But the thing is, improving that really is tough for the cruel person for whom it's really part of their personality trait. That's the tough thing, because that takes a long time. First of all, you can't do it because of the free will thing we were talking about. You can make suggestions to somebody, but it's their choice whether they listen to you or not. And then if somebody has, for a cruel person who's been doing it for many years in their lives, it's tough for them to change, because for them it works. It works. I step on people, I demean people, I call them names, and they all cower and they, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. How can I help you? What should I do for you? They get really good results from it, but it is not good long-term, because what are they doing? They're ending up creating a universe of miserable people around themselves. But so that's tough for them to change. But what can we do when we're around them? I talk about that in my book about, tips that we can do to help ourselves if we're with a cruel person, to help change that, change our situation so that we can either deal with it or move on from it. How can we do that?
You're going to have a longer discussion on forgiveness, cruelty, and these are very thorny subjects. Forgiveness, cruelty, and conscious love. Surprising to me that forgiveness came first. These are conflicting issues for all of us.
Yes.
How do you do this? I mean, I don't want to forgive somebody that's been cruel,
right,
not only to me, but maybe to somebody else.
Exactly. So yeah, I do this a lot in the book in terms of giving different approaches to these thorny issues and how can we resolve some of these seemingly unresolvable issues that don't seem to go together. So let's just quickly talk about forgiveness. So forgiveness, first, what I don't mean by forgiveness is giving somebody a hall pass. Remember you're in high school, you need a hall pass to go to the bathroom. That idea, for those people who don't know what that means. It's just giving them a free pass. No, that's not what forgiveness to me is. Forgiveness is acceptance. Do I accept the behavior, whether it's good behavior, or in this case, it's going to be bad behavior? Do I accept the bad behavior? And then if I accept it, meaning what? Not that I approve it. That's not what acceptance means either. So again, I get into this in more detail in my book. But the idea of acceptance meaning accept the person for who they are. Their behavior was an expression of who they were at the time. Accept them for who they are, not who I wish they would be. So that's the idea. That's the definition of love in the way I'm using love, as acceptance of not changing the person. So that goes back to the free will. They all kind of connect, accepting their free will decision to be who they were at that time. Did they exhibit bad behavior towards me? Were they cruel? Maybe yes. I don't accept their bad behavior. I'm accepting the fact that they did it. That's the acceptance. Then I decide, what do I do with it? I can either, if it wasn't really that bad behavior, I may say, okay, I forgive you and let's stay friends. Or I have 4 degrees of this. We'll just talk about 2 of the 4 for simplicity purposes here. But let's say that they were really bad and very cruel. Then I accept that's an expression of who they were. See you later, I'm walking. I'm not seeing you ever again. So that's the 4th degree out of the 4 degrees of this forgiveness idea, where I'm accepting them for who they were, but I'm not accepting their behavior. So I separate those 2 in some of these essays. That's important because we need to judge people's behavior, not judging who they are. I don't walk in their shoes, but I am judging their behavior. And in that case, I'm walking away from them in that situation. That also embraces the idea of love because I've accepted them without trying to change them. All right. That's how they kind of overlap. That's where the overlap of the Venn diagrams are. But there's big not overlaps too, because I'm walking away in that situation.
It brings it into a whole different perspective.
Right.
And one that I think is doable. The responsibility falls on each of us. Do we accept the person's behavior and stick around, or is it awful enough for me that I walk away? It's your responsibility, not for them to change. It's your responsibility of what you do based on their behavior. What final thought do you have for our listeners today?
I would say that people need to, especially in the times that we're living in now, we need to look less at the differences and more at where the overlap and the commonalities are. To me, that's friendship. That's a simple definition of friendship, the way I think of friendship. And it's more, and sometimes people will talk about looking at things more from a loving standpoint, and I get it, but not everybody, that idea doesn't resonate with everybody, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's not as nice as you'd like them to be. So you're not feeling lovey-dovey, so to speak. So I use the word friendship because friendship does not always mean you're loving and embracing the person, but you can still be friends with them, that idea. And to me, that's a step in the right direction, as opposed to this tribalism that we seem steeped in worldwide of what's in it for me, and I'm in my own bubble and leave me alone. And that's okay sometimes, but can we see those overlaps where we have some commonality with others? And can we even be friends for a split second with somebody at the swimming pool that I go to, for example, where I swim at my city pool every 3 times a week? And I do those little steps.
I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to mention that you can get Kelvin's books at Amazon.com. Are there other outlets?
Yes, it's all online throughout the world. All the countries have it all throughout the world. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you and meeting you once again next Monday, November the 15th, to talk about overcoming the fear of death. Again, you can contact Kelvin at kelvinchin.org or turningwithin.org. You've been listening to Metro on KGNU Radio, Radio, Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. Stay tuned for the Shortwave Report, followed by the Ralph Nader Radio Hour, and at 5, the BBC News. I thank all of our listeners for joining us today and for your continued support of KGNU Radio. I am your host, Miriam Schiff, as always reminding you, please be good to each other.
You're in tune with KGNU, Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins.
Support comes from the Parent Engagement Network, providing a holistic approach to supporting families by combining parent education as well as parent leadership since 2001. More information at parentengagementnetwork.org.